On today's episode of Locked On Suns, Phoenix has had an extra day off between games 1 and 2 after a disappointing second half against Minnesota on Saturday. How do they win it? What has to happen? We'll break it all down. Let's go.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We are back. This is Locked On Phoenix Suns. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Brendon Kleen, a credentialed media member covering the Suns for the past 7 seasons, and the host of the Just Basketball Show wherever you get your podcast. Thank you for making Locked On Suns your first listen to start off your Tuesday, a game day, a playoff game day here for the Suns. Wherever you are finding us, thank you for being here. We're free and available on all podcast platforms, including YouTube, so just hit that follow or subscribe button wherever you are finding the show. Get a new episode in your feed every single Monday through Friday. Become an everydayer and get locked onto the Phoenix Suns all season, postseason, long, and beyond into the offseason. Today's show, guys, brought to you by Monopoly Go. I admit it, I have a competitive side, and it is a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on a classic Monopoly game. So join your friends. Download Monopoly Go now, free, on the App Store or Google Play. Game day. And we're going to talk about Game 2, look ahead to Game 2, the same way we looked back and recapped Game 1. So we're going to start when the Suns are on offense, go to when the Suns are on defense, talk about... Look, I don't even want to call them adjustments. I think on offense, maybe there's some more adjustments. On defense, I think a lot of it is going to be playing better, but we'll get there in a second. Offensively, priority number 1 is find ways for Devin Booker to play better. I think, obviously, if you're looking at the offensive end of the court, there's a lot of things you could talk about, whether that is Jusuf Nurkic, the overall kind of pace and organization that the Suns played with, who they ran things through at which times, and what that meant as far as the defensive matchups they were trying to pick at. And I have some thoughts on that. But first and foremost, they need to get Devin Booker in a better position to succeed, right? I think that a lot of the onus is on him to have an answer for Jaden McDaniels, frankly, right? McDaniels blocked him twice at the rim in this game, blew up a fair amount of sets where Book was initiating, just affected his rhythm, affected his approach, his mentality in the game, and that can't happen again. So that's where I'm looking first and foremost. Now, how do the Suns do that? What can the coaching staff do? What can his teammates do? Well, I look at the two three-pointers that Royce O'Neal made that were assisted by Book. I believe it was the second and the fourth quarter. In both situations, the offensive set began with Booker off the ball, coming off of a pin down screen, getting the ball in a position to attack, probing the defense, forcing help to come, and then kicking out to Royce O'Neal, who in both cases, something he's very good at doing, lifted, which if you remember Jay Crowder was excellent at doing, those kind of relocations that spot-up spacers can do, where a lot of the time they can begin in the corner. The help off of them in the weak side might lose track, and then there they are now on the wing. That's an easier pass to make. Oftentimes, it's confusing the recovery of that closeout, and the guy often will run back to the corner where he thinks that shooter is, and Royce O'Neal was able to make the Wolves pay. So that type of set has multiple things that will help Booker, will help the Suns. One, I think it gets Booker the ball in motion, in a flow, rather than just at a standstill trying to attack McDaniels, who, while I think Booker should have solutions for over time, and we need to see that in Game 2, is a very good defender. I think it would be silly of anybody to just let Booker ram his head into a wall, in this case, that wall being McDaniels, over and over without adjusting. So You get him a pin down. And in some cases, I think at least one of those plays actually was Alexander Walker, who, watching back, Book did not have as much difficulty with, even close to as much difficulty with, as he did McDaniel. So maybe there's some opportunities when it is Alexander Walker for Book to be even more aggressive. Either way, when he gets those pin downs, when he comes off of a screen, he is able to attack a rotating defense rather than a set defense, and at least early in the game, I could see that getting him some rhythm, because in the first quarter, he only took one shot at the rim, only one shot really comfortable. He had another paint shot, but that was basically like a free throw line jumper, and his other 3 shots were all threes, and at least 2 of those threes were pull-ups. That's not a great way to get your best player in rhythm. Whereas, as we flip to the other side, or not the other side, but the other scorer on this team, Kevin Durant, he had a great first quarter, great third quarter. I think that if he can stay in that type of a rhythm from mid-range, it goes a long way for the Suns to just get difficult buckets against a very good Minnesota defense. That has to be there. I wonder what they will do, and this is where, who am I? I'm some dude, right? So I'm not going to sit here and say it's good or bad, but one thing that I noticed a lot watching it back, I pretty much have watched this game 3 times now, is especially early on, the way that they've had a very clear mission to have Durant in particular attack Rudy Gobert in space. And the same can be said for some of the other players, but it was Durant early most of all. And Durant made shots over Gobert. There was one time in the early fourth quarter where Gobert picked his pocket. There were some other times where the Suns got that switch maybe for Durant or somebody else, but then didn't really attack it, had to kind of reset things. And I guess I'm just going to be curious to see if they go at that again, because while Durant made him pay, and I could easily do that again, at the same time, it takes a lot of time to do that. And if it doesn't feel like it's a great bang for your buck in terms of the time it takes versus the payoff of, are you really getting great offense off of that every single time you do it, we'll see. It also, in some cases, when it is Durant, it takes Towns off of them. So is Gobert really that much tastier of a target than Towns? I don't know, So that surprised me, and I think in general, the mismatch hunting early, they just need to be careful with it, right? Because it didn't last. And so I think it's for the betterment of everybody, all 3 big 3 players on this team, to just get into a little bit more of a flow on the offensive end. And looking back, I know I've been a little hard on Nurkic. I feel like they did run some offense through him, maybe more than I gave them credit for. They got some, I think Beal and Durant both scored off of a cut. Maybe that might have been, unfortunately, Durant's missed dunk. I don't remember exactly. But they didn't run, and they did run some stagger screens for Booker, where Allen in particular, his involvement as a screener, I think the Suns were trying that stuff. It just didn't result in shots for Allen in particular very often, and didn't seem to just be effective. But again, that's what happens when you're playing a great Minnesota defense. So a little bit more Nurkic at least as one of the screeners. Maybe it's Durant as the other, with Booker or Beal coming off of it. I think that is their bread and butter at the end of the day, and more of it is good. Last little note, though, one thing I think that they could really do is to run off of made shots. Minnesota's transition defense was excellent in this game. It's going to be excellent, I would imagine, all series. They kept their turnovers relatively low, and even when they did turn it over, somehow they were able to stifle the Suns in transition. They just had a very good defensive game. But the Suns, at their most aggressive this season, you can watch the games, look at the stats, they were running off of makes pretty consistently. And that takes a mentality. That's the kind of thing maybe you don't prep for in game one, and maybe you realize some things and you have these 2 days. Now you can do it in game two. I wouldn't be surprised if, especially probably Booker would be and it might help him get into a rhythm, see a few go in, get a few easy looks. We saw them do this against Denver, right? If the Suns were a little bit more aggressive after, let's say, a made layup to get that inbound pass in quickly and bolt. And I think that can be a way to even up the transition game a little bit, get some easy offense, get these guys going, play faster, all the stuff we know they need to do. All right, on the defensive end, play better is overly simple, right? What do the Suns need to do better? And some ideas about how we could see that play out coming up next. First, today's show brought to you by Prize Picks. Get in on the playoff action and win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks as you and the world's best players take the game to a new level during basketball's postseason. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as few as 4 correct picks, turning $10 into $1,000 with basketball, hockey, and college basketball entries today on Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. What I love about Prize Picks is that there is no head-to-head, there is no league, there is no nonsense, basically. It is you versus the Prize Picks player projections, meaning if you have a sense, if you have some math, some tape grinding that tells you, hey, this guy's going to do better than that projection would indicate, you bet it. Quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, an enormous selection of players and stat types all combined to make Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. So download the app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com, promo code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. Keeping the show rolling. Suns on defense. What do we need to see here? Well, I'll get the quick one out of the way first, right? The Suns, I think, need to watch out for, okay, Gobert's going to get offensive rebounds, fine. Towns might even get some offensive rebounds, depending on where he is on the floor. Not necessarily a lot you're going to do. Now, should Gobert get fewer than 6? Ideally, yes, but look, that's what Rudy Gobert does. I'm not going to count on that. What I think the Suns need to be more careful with, now that they've seen it, is Jaden McDaniels and Nickeil Alexander-Walker crashing the glass. Okay? I think that's the best bet as far as limiting some of the offensive rebounds. I believe at least one of Conley's was on a tap or sort of a loose ball from somebody else. So let's say you get rid of one of his, both of McDaniels, and one of Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Well, all of a sudden, now you're down to 9. You know, Minnesota had how many second chance points in this game? Oh, yeah. ESPN doesn't show you that for some reason, so I don't have that number in front of me. But you start to chip away at that advantage for sure. Beyond that, okay, that's sort of the, I don't think, this is something that I don't know if the Suns need to do, but Nickeil Alexander-Walker, I believe, made at least one pull-up 3. That's a tip your hat kind of a moment in the game at the end of the day, right? I'm not sure if that will continue. If it does, what are you going to do? You let a guy like that take pull-up 3s all day because that is a best of... That's always going to be the best option for a defense versus everything else Minnesota can do. So, okay, those guys out of the way. I've talked about this plenty, and I'm going to keep harping on it. I think one thing the Suns can do just to provide a little bit more resistance, make life a little bit harder on Edwards and Towns, is not give up switches so easily, right? Both of these guys were just barreling through smaller defenders. They were able to pick and choose the guy they wanted to attack in space. They were able to, in largely Cat's case, maybe this doesn't qualify fully under the don't give up switches so easily. Maybe I should just say this. Be more forceful with your coverages. Because the next thing I was about to say is Towns really was not fazed by the double teams that he saw. Only 2 turnovers for him, 4 assists. That's a great ratio. 5 of 9 from the field. maybe had one charge, but they weren't able to bait him into some of those mistakes that he can make. He had a very clean game. Ant, on the other hand, when the Suns did send Eubanks out a little bit more aggressively in the pick and roll, no matter who they put on him, no matter who they switched on him, Ant didn't seem to be phased. Now, look, guys playing well against what you're doing, there's not a lot you're going to say that you can change, right? I think it's why I go back to do it better, Don't give up those switches if you're not planning to. I doubt the Suns went into the game saying, yeah, let Ant attack Grayson Allen multiple times in a row. No, probably not. So do better to prevent that. Send help more aggressively if you do get into those emergency situations and you see that Ant has Allen isolated. Go out of the box to send more aggressive help, or have the kind of peel switching we see sometimes nowadays where when that drive gets to a certain point, the big or some other player can kind of step up and corral that, and then Allen can peel back can recover out to a shooter. There's ways once you're in that dynamic to fix it, and I think the Suns will be more ready to do that. As it pertains to some of those other coverages, either do them better and have some, finer details, I would say, to improve the effectiveness, or if it's not effective straight up, then bail on it. I think with something like doubling Towns, who that is matters, right? Is it a bigger player, or is it somebody that he's just going to be able to body or see over the top of for a pass, shoot over the top of, versus, and the Suns did botch at least the first double of Towns, came from the wrong place. Booker had to communicate it out, and so they weren't on their P's and Q's there. I think they will be in game 2, or they should be. And then with Towns, or with Ant, it's like, yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know. He turned it over 6 times. It still felt like he owned the game. 33 points, plus 19, huge flurry in the third quarter, making every type of shot. I would say one thing with him is the Suns will be more ready for him to be a threat in terms of aggressiveness, and obviously the fact that he made them on the pull-up threes. I think it's reasonable that the Suns could have gone into game 1 feeling like, even if we give Anthony Edwards that shot with Nurkic, maybe not fully up in his face, maybe a point of attack defender who's not, they don't have an elite, unless they're going to play a Kogi, they don't have an elite point of attack defender, so Ant's going to have some space for those, but is he going to take them? Is he going to make them? We'll see, and we'll adjust from there. Well, he did, and they need to adjust from there. So I think that whether it's the big being up a little bit more, having a hand up readily, like he's, effectively Lillard or Steph or something, in some cases treat it like that big of a problem, because it kind of was, or at least maybe once he gets hot you do it. I don't know. Maybe you pick him up higher on the court and pressure him more, and when he does have the ball, there's a lot of things you can do, but I think being ready to say, okay, this is the version of Ant that we're needing to guard versus the guy who scored 15 a game on us in the regular season, that's going to be just a mentality shakeup that can benefit the Suns. All right. Lastly, Grayson Allen is questionable. Eric Gordon is verging on, I don't want to say unplayable because there's probably not another option, but a problem in this rotation. How can the Suns adjust there? What are the ripple effects if they do change the personnel up? We'll get into that next. First, today's show brought to you by Betterhelp. Betterhelp is changing the way that therapy can work for you. Sometimes we all need the opportunity to get things off our chest. Big or small, certain things can really start to get to you. It's important to let that out, especially to someone who's unbiased about your life. So today, I want to tell you how I really feel about something, and you might even be thinking about the same thing this week. This is easy. I want this series to be competitive. Obviously I'm an analyst to some degree, and I'm going to do shows no matter what happens, but I like to watch this team play basketball. I grew up watching this team. We all are cheering for this team. It would suck if they were to go out early. I don't want that to happen. I want it to be at least a competitive series. Obviously, it'd be nice if they won it. Game 1 was a bummer. Therapy can be different for everybody. Most of us have bigger problems than our favorite sports team, and it's important to get those things off your chest every once in a while. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. Entirely online, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Visit betterhelp.com/LockedOnNBA to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. Today's show also brought to you by Monopoly Go. Here's the deal. We've all been there, either as a player or a fan. It's halftime and the scoreboard's not looking good. You're feeling low, not sure you or your team can pull out a win. That's when you dig deep, lift your head up, and say to yourself, time to get back in the game, pull off some bank heists, and take as much of my friends' money as I possibly can. That's right. The smash hit mobile game Monopoly Go lets you compete with your friends to get the most riches in the biggest empire. It's the Monopoly you love, but on your phone anytime with tons of new twists, including leaderboards to compare your progress, get those bragging rights over your buddies. Play on countless dynamic Monopoly boards. Make your friends bankrupt by smashing their landmarks with a wrecking ball and charge other players rent for your iconic properties. You can even work with your friends to crack open community chests and in tournaments to get extra rewards and climb that leaderboard with them. So get back out there, put on your game face, and download Monopoly Go now, free on the App Store or Google Play. Closing out the show. All right, so Grayson Allen with that ankle sprain is questionable. My expectation, I think yours too, would not be really any other adjustment to make here, is that Royce O'Neal would start this game if Allen's not able to go. It sounded as if at practice from the people who were out there in Minneapolis that Grayson participated to some degree in practice but wasn't a full participant, has been getting treatment round the clock, as if there's guys who are like, no, I'm good, don't make my injury feel better. It's always funny to me. But still up in the air as to if he will play, I think is fair to say. Let's talk about just O'Neal with the starting lineup, because I think that could be a pretty substantial difference in terms of the matchups in this series, at least in this game. We spent a lot of time pre-series in the lead up to it talking about who Towns would guard. In game one, that was Durant. I expect that to continue if nothing else were to change. But if Allen is out, if O'Neal is in his place, I think we could see Towns guard him. I think McDaniels had so much success against Booker that they're not going to mess with that. So they would probably go back to Anthony Edwards on Durant, Conley on Beal, Gobert obviously on Nurkic. That matters because O'Neal's not necessarily capable in the same exact ways of punishing Towns as Allen would have been or as Durant wasn't even in the last game. O'Neal's not going to sprint off of a screen and catch and on the move, take a wild three and make it, right? He's not even as much of a threat, period, meaning Towns can just play off of him in addition to not having to really navigate some of those more complex sets. It would just clog the paint even more, frankly, because I think Minnesota would take every advantage of saying, great, we can have Towns as another layer of help after we already gave the Suns so much trouble on their downhill scoring game, their drive and kick offense. Awesome. Let's do it. Towns, ignore O'Neal until he makes you beat him, until he makes you react, until he beats you. I think we could see a few things. One would be O'Neal as an initiator, sort of as a point guard option. And that would make, if O'Neal's handling the ball through a screen, that puts Towns in a bind, right? Either he has to switch onto whoever is setting that screen, or he has to try to navigate that screen and stay attached to O'Neal, whatever that might be. That could be an option. Use O'Neal as a screener. In some of those double screen situations we've seen, could at least easily see that where O'Neal sets that screen and then pops out, or he sets a good screen and forces Towns to switch on to the ball handler. There's a bunch of stuff you can do there, right? So it's not terrible. It would just be a pretty big adjustment if that domino effect from Allen being out were to happen. Now, the other domino effect would be suddenly you need more minutes to go around. And that's probably the more significant situation here. Now, I think that could kind of open up a pretty interesting opportunity to see what Okogie looks like in this matchup. I don't hate the idea in a vacuum of Josh chasing Ant around a little bit because, one, I would like to see Minnesota score 120 again before I count on it. And so theoretically, given the whole 82-game sample we had, the Wolves are a team that you can maybe afford to have Okogie out there for, given that he's going to hurt your offense a little bit in turn, right? This is not the Nuggets or Boston or something where you need to score every possible point, and any player that clogs your spacing or can't make a shot or is a turnover risk or anything, you can't really afford to have out there. Minnesota's not quite at that level, so maybe you can, and maybe you can get some defensive leveling up from having Okogie be on Ant. So I think he'd be the logical guy to step into a bigger role. The last issue, though, as we go through the domino effect personnel-wise, is Eric Gordon also had a bad game. So you might be talking, and has not been really consistent or impactful on anywhere near a consistent basis since the All-Star break. Really, the second half of the season, it's been hit or miss. That can change because, again, the thing about being inconsistent is sometimes you're good. So, if he makes 3 of his 4 threes in the next game and 9 points, we're probably feeling okay about those minutes, and the coaching staff is as well. But given that you can't count on it, given that every minute and every possession matters in these situations in the playoffs, I wouldn't be surprised if they tried to knock his minutes down a little bit too. So Allen played 25 and he got hurt. Gordon played 21. Let's say Gordon plays more like 15 or 12. You're talking about 30, 35 minutes you need to find. Maybe Okogie can play 15. Where are the other 20 coming from? It's tough. So maybe Gordon just has to play a lot again, and you have to cross your fingers. The last player I wanted to talk about, though, is Bol. Is there a place for him in this series at all? I think size-wise, it's difficult. But I think as we've seen the Suns do pretty regularly this season, you could see them put Bol on somebody significantly smaller than him, or more likely, I think, in this matchup, it would be Jaden McDaniels. Now, I just talked about in the last segment, McDaniels as an offensive rebounder. He would look at Bol as chopped liver in that kind of a matchup, just crashing the boards, bowling, pun intended, I guess, bowling Bol over in order to go just get loose balls. But that's, for the amount of minutes we're talking about, pretty minimal. I think it could work. It would just dare McDaniels to be aggressive even more so than most teams already do by leaving him open from deep and everything else. If you're looking for ways to steal some minutes, maybe get some offense going in especially those lineups where Beal is the only of the big 3 on the court. Maybe those are less possible now. I don't really know how it would all look, but I like the idea of Beal and Nurkic and Bol all out there with maybe, Gordon and let's say Okogie or something. It's just about surviving, obviously. It's just about trying to find ways to get something out of your personnel, get something out of the mismatches that you're creating in order to survive those bench minutes, get a little advantage here and there, and obviously win on the margins. The game's going to get decided by the stuff we talked about at the beginning. Allen wasn't much of a factor in game 1 anyway, so it's not like losing him is going to shatter much of what worked for the Suns in game 1. O'Neal has things that make him uniquely good, even in this matchup. I would expect the Suns to use those. They need a good game for Gordon. I would not be surprised if we saw a little bit of Okogie, and it might work. Bol, toss-up, question mark, we'll see. That'll wrap us up for the day. Enjoy Game 2. I'll be back with you after the final buzzer with a recap episode. Hit follow or subscribe to get that episode if you have not already, and I will talk to you later on.